I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and behind me is the all-new Mercedes-AMG SL63. Now, this is a really interesting car because in many ways, the SL is now returning to its roots. It started as a Mercedes-Benz sports car that was designed for racing, and over many generations, it actually grew into more of a bloated boulevard cruiser, a GT car, a luxury convertible, which is beloved by many Mercedes-Benz fans, but it became quite distant from the purpose of the original SL. With the new generation convertible, Mercedes is actually taking it back towards those roots. This is an AMG-developed product. There is no luxury spec Mercedes-Benz version available. And here in Australia, we only get the most powerful one, the SL63, using the twin-turbo, non-hybrid, 4-litre petrol V8 engine. I'm going to take you through in today's video the things the SL63 gets right, the areas where it could improve further in order to better take on vehicles like Porsche's 911 Cabriolet. And then, of course, we'll take the SL63 for a drive, and I'll let you know what this $400,000 Mercedes-AMG cab is really like on the road. But before we get started, hit subscribe down below. Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by Budget Direct. Overseas, the new SL range is quite a bit bigger than what we see here in Australia, where we just get a best of the best SL63 4MATIC Plus. That's a variable all drive system that can still send 100% of torque to the rear wheels. Over in Europe and in the UK, you can even get a 4-cylinder SL, the 43, with rear wheel drive, but that's a 2-litre. If you want the 4-litre, you'll need the SL63, and the Americans can even get a detuned SL55 for a bit less money. But here in Australia, we just see the 63, and it has a lavish amount of equipment as standard, which is appropriate at this price. And I think for the SL customer that isn't going to want things like grain leather seats or a base model stereo, you're going to want all of the fruit. So the options on this car are much more about customization to your personal preferences than they are about having to add core equipment. So this vehicle, as we see it here, this has the night package. That's going to be a popular one, and it's actually relatively reasonably priced, blacking out a lot of the chrome elements outside with black chrome. So it's not actually black plastic, it's still chrome, just black chrome. So you don't have to feel like you are taking a step back in terms of materials. You're also getting those black, matte black 21-inch wheels outside, but as the car comes as standard, it has more silver features, silver wheels, a little bit of chrome. For me, that's probably how I would want my SL to look. I'm not that much of a fan of black packs. Of course, you can let me know down below in the comments. Now this one as it sits here is a relatively stock standard looking SL, red over black. You can certainly go for some more bold color combinations, including a new color called Hyper Blue, which is a beautiful turquoise, and a tan interior, which I think would be really distinct and individual and would look great. So what we have here is effectively a new interpretation of Benz's current interior design language. So we're seeing a lot of familiar features from other current Mercedes-Benz and AMG products, but just with an additional layer of polish and luxury, which you would expect at this kind of price point, because the SL is one of this brand's flagship models. So we have almost a square, it's slightly portrait touchscreen here in the center at 12 inches, and it does have a bit of a party trick, because being a convertible, you can get a bit of glare, so you can adjust the screen electrically, almost to vertical, which is slightly uncomfortable. But I found yesterday driving with the roof open all day pretty much, I never needed to adjust the screen, and that's because the brightness is so good that it seems to outshine the sun. But of course, in high summer, you still might need to get that going. Now, for some reason, my seat massaging has started. I probably bumped that, and it's a good moment to talk about the seats, which are very comfortable. They are covered in Napa leather, they feel very expensive, and they're well contoured to your body shape with adjustable bolsters, super adjustable lumbar through a graphic here on the screen. They do have massage, heating, and cooling, the full set. And even if you go for the AMG performance seat, which is about $2,500, you actually don't lose much comfort, just the seat looks a little bit cooler, a bit more of a race sort of design to the seat. Now you can choose a whole bunch of interior colors: black, tan, a deeper brown, red pepper, which I drove yesterday, looked great, and even a white seat if you want to go full Miami spec on this car. You do get a digital driver display as well, which is very customizable and works well. AMG's steering wheel with quick access to drive modes and some shortcuts of your own choosing. And then these little spokes, which continue to be a bit of a usability nightmare because the shortcuts are so tiny, you've got to be very, very precise. A Burmester 3D surround sound stereo is standard, and you can even hear it reasonably well with the roof down at 100, and even with the windows down, which speaks volumes to the tuning that's been put into that system. And speaking of open top driving, as we see it here, the roof takes 15 seconds to operate at up to 50 kilometers per hour officially, but a little bit quicker than that unofficially as well. Plus, the seat has the Airscarf function to blow warm air on one's neck so you don't feel uncomfortable at any moment, because why should you ever feel uncomfortable in a Mercedes SL? In picking up the two dicky seats in the back of the cab, the SL has lost some boot space. You get one of those kick to open sensors, which means you can have your hands full with your travel bags or your shopping, and the power tailgate gets out of the way, because who would want to have to do manual labor at this price? Now, what you do have here is minimum 210 liters, and that's if you've got it as we see the SL here, with the drop top down, which means you get a little bit less room in the boot. If you pop that roof up and you're restricted to having it up, the capacity does grow marginally by about 20%. But the best way you should think about the SL's boot is it's really got room for like a couple of leather or canvas bags for a weekend away, and then the storage capacity is just about doubled if you treat the second row as a shelf for additional bags. So now for the best part, let's take the new SL63 out for a drive. Come to a lovely picturesque little road outside Sydney for the kind of punt that you would take for a weekend drive in the SL63. It still retains some of its grand touring properties, as I'll reveal to you. You can still do long road trips in this car, but I think for a lot of people, it is about taking the opportunities you can get for a quick burn out of whatever city it is that you live in. And the SL63 is a great partner for that. So we'll get to the engine in a moment, we'll get to the ride in a moment. First of all, I want to talk about what's happening under the skin, because this is where the SL is really different to the previous gen, and in fact the last few generations. We've got an AMG-developed platform here. So this is not a car where Mercedes-Benz sells a version. You can't get an SL180 3-cylinder and then AMG takes it and turns it into a muscle car. AMG developed the new SL from scratch. So we have an aluminium space frame platform here developed in-house, and it hasn't been the last word in weight saving. This is still a heavy car, but I went into the SL quite cynically. I drove all day yesterday on a bunch of technical and fast roads to see how it would perform, and I was pleasantly surprised. It doesn't feel like a particularly heavy car from behind the wheel. It is a bit of a curse of cabriolets everywhere to be heavy as a general sort of matter of fact, and this is a heavy one, but its dynamics are actually just super stable, super solid. You feel the weight in the fact that this car has a lot of grip on the road, the fact that it never gets flapped by a mid-corner bump. It is a little bit less playful than it might have been if this car was 300 kilos lighter, but of course we can't drive that car because it doesn't exist, not in 2023. But the platform itself is so rigid and stiff and capable that it gives you so much mechanical grip through the chassis, and you're presented with so many options as a driver as a result of that. And you can play with the balance of the vehicle even though it is heavy, including the all-wheel drive system, which does allow you to direct 100% of that torque to the rear in certain situations. And more importantly, because of the amount of mechanical grip and the good chemical grip from the tires too, you can actually extract a lot of performance from the 4-litre twin turbo. We've got a speed shift multi-clutch transmission, and it certainly lets you turn it on when you have the space to do so, and it sings too through those quad trapezoidal exhausts. It's a beast. And if anything, it just throws into sharp relief this massive distinction that's happening right now within AMG between part of their range, including cars like the C63, which are going to 2-litre plug-in hybrid 4-cylinder formats, and then you've still got the sort of true 63 product, of which the SL63 is one, with the 4-litre twin-turbo V8. And I think this engine is still so special that it's worth spending quite a lot of money if you have deep pockets in order to get the latest developments of what I would consider to be a true AMG 63 product. And it is fascinating to see some rumors starting to spread from credible sources in Europe about whether or not the C63 and the E63 in future might return to bigger engines. And if you've watched my review of the C43 on the channel recently, you'll know that I've been quite critical of the tuning of the 2-litre that AMG is starting to use, and we don't have any of those problems here in the SL63 with the 4-litre V8. The tuning of engine and transmission and all-wheel drive system in this vehicle are an absolute masterstroke. The throttle response is immediate. It feels naturally aspirated, not turbocharged. It likes to rev. And the transmission doesn't exhibit the usual multi-clutch gremlins. It's a drivable car, even at low speed. You could commute in the SL63. It might be a little pricey when it comes to fuel, which is going to be around that high teens, 20 litre per 100k mark in town, but its touring economy is actually pretty good. I saw 11 litres per 100k's and I was having a crack on country roads yesterday, so I think that's quite excellent. The transmission just works so well with this engine. You can either drive it yourself or you can play with the plethora of customizable drive modes to get the reactions that you want from the system. And it is just such a special unit, such a wonderful match to the sort of open top sports car that this is. The outputs are of course significant. 430 kilowatts of power, 800 Newton meters of torque. The claim 0 to 100 is in the low 3-second range, and because we do have that all-wheel drive system here, I've got no doubt that that would be matchable, and we hope to independently test those performance claims in future here at Chasing Cars. But for now, it's been more of a seat of the pants, extensive first drive on real regional roads here in Australia. And that leads me onto the chassis, which is superb. I've seen a bit of criticism of this car overseas, particularly for a firm ride, and perhaps it is compared to luxury convertibles. But when you consider what the new SL is able to do dynamically and the sort of performance that AMG has put up in recent years with really brittle, uncompliant ride, I've been pleasantly surprised here because it does have compliance. It's got multiple layers of it. It's actually quite a polished suspension here, adaptively damped, and it just works well for the type of car that it is. There is a slightly firm edge. You can certainly tell what's going on the road, but it's never crashy. It feels rigid but compliant. I like the ride. And the handling of the vehicle, you can always tell there's a slightly underlying sense of mass, but the front end is keener than you'd expect for having to hold a big 4-litre V8 over the front of it. Turns in crisply with good grip from the front tyres. Steering feel is quite pleasant. You know, you can tell it's an electric rack, but there's a great ratio running through the steering wheel and it's very faithful. And then you have some throttle steerability through the loud pedal too, particularly as you start to decrease the intervention levels from stability and traction. But we're driving with all that stuff on today. We're just having a nice country road punt, just a quick but safe punt. And the SL63 is as good at that stuff as it is more of that balls out, driving for pace kind of motoring, which it's happy to do as well. So I actually really like the balance that Mercedes have gotten to here. It's definitely less of a boulevard cruiser. It's less luxurious. You don't have little things like that robot passing in your seatbelt. You might miss stuff like that if what you like is a luxury cabrio. It's definitely more hardcore, but it doesn't do away with that livability that you would expect from the three-pointed star, but actually that AMG hasn't been providing as much as it should have been the last few years. This is a step back in the direction of compliance in many ways, while still letting you have it all in terms of performance. You know, in a shootout with a 911, which one should you take? It's personal preference. I think the Porsche has maybe half a degree more magic to the chassis, but the Mercedes is a really complete sports car, as it should be at this kind of money. So that's my opinion of the new Mercedes-AMG SL63. Certainly the best SL in my lifetime, I reckon, and possibly the best since the original version, because the SL has now returned to its roots as a Mercedes-Benz sports car that's designed for more hardcore driving. And yet it manages to do that without hugely sacrificing ride quality, which is really surprising. Perhaps AMG is turning a bit of a corner on its approach to ride compliance. In every other way though, the SL is hugely talented and capable to drive, though it is difficult to ignore the weight. It's pretty enormously heavy. That's really the one area where the SL has gone backwards compared to the previous versions, but in every other way, I think that it has moved forward, certainly since its direct predecessor left this market a few years ago. The biggest problem for the SL, probably the 911 Turbo Cabriolet, still that benchmark Germanic sports luxury convertible. But if you're an AMG person, if you're an SL enthusiast, then you'd be silly to not at least closely consider the new SL if you're looking for your next indulgent cabriolet. Please let me know your opinion down below in the comments. While you're there, hit subscribe and the notification bell. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.